time to get to campus and sort of a colder. We've had great weather in the last week or so, so I'm hoping it doesn't rain this afternoon, but we can't do much about it. It was great fun last night to spend some time with some of you in the class of 68 and to make our way around campus and say hello to others, and looking forward to the rest of the day and tonight, of course. And we want to try to do this morning is really, as advertised, share a little bit on the state of the school. So I'll spend some time talking in a few areas about the state of the school, and then hand it off to some colleagues and a couple of students who will talk more specifically about some of the work they're doing, their own experiences, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do some Q&A at that point, and then we'll head out the door to what's next. So I guess the first thing I want to say off the top, and it won't come as a surprise, that I think the state of the school is excellent. It's probably true that if you came to this every year, you'd hear me say that. And I guess there's two reasons for that. One is because I believe it to be true, certainly by any relative measure or any objective measure, and thinking about Brooks School's state and the work that we're able to do with kids in our charge. I think you'd have to work hard to convince me that our advantages and all that we have at our disposal doesn't position us to do great, deep, lasting, meaningful work with kids. And so I feel very good about that. In trying to underline that, I want to spend a little time talking about sort of the school in the moment. I try with our board too when we're meeting to sort of start by talking about kids and experiences and what's happening here and now. In a way that gives you a chance, I hope, to feel the school and what it's like. And a lot of that is about people. So I'll spend a little time on that. I want to talk about progress, kinds of things that we're working on, progress that we've made, progress that we're anticipating making in different areas, physically in terms of the campus itself, programmatically, and some of what we're trying to move in the direction of improving, all of it really aimed at improving the student experience and attracting more and more students to our school and finding ways to do better and better work with them as we go. I want to spend time on challenges too. I think that when you receive your Brooks Bulletin or emails, alumni emails, whatever it might be, we don't really talk about, here are the things that keep us up at night when we think about the future of the school. And I do want to share some of that. It's just the kinds of things that perplex us a little bit as we think out some distance about Brooks School's future. We're in our 91st school year this year, and are increasingly mindful of the fact that the centennial for the school's now 9 years away. It'll be 8 next year, and then 7, and it will come quickly. And as we think a lot about trying to situate the school to be successful in a second century, a lot of the work that we're going to be doing in the next number of years will be aimed at positioning us to ensure that, to be sure that this school continues to be excellent, in great shape, and in more and more impactful ways reaching kids going forward. So a little bit on challenges and things that we're trying to address to ensure that I want to talk about. And then I'm going to speculate a little bit about what the Centennial Campaign will be about. You can rest assured there will be a Centennial Campaign. And I think as we finish one campaign, no time like the present to start thinking about what the next one might involve. So I want to think ahead a little bit about what sorts of things we'll be needing, wanting, dreaming about as we approach year 0 of that effort. But let me start really with the moment and a feeling that I have about the school thriving and doing well. I think, as sharing with the alumni board yesterday afternoon, in some respects, the best way to do that is just to talk to you about the week. And I was thinking this week, how would I capture what leaves me feeling really good about our school? And it's really the kinds of things that are happening. So Sunday night, just 6 days ago, we're in chapel in the evenings at 7:30, and young women in our history department sort of spent some time talking about, we've been this spring having faculty members sort of give all of us a thought for the week as we start the week. And she talked about going to college thinking that she was going to be a TV anchor and finding her way to being a history teacher and finding her way to calling. And I think for our sixth formers who are approaching that transition themselves, it's a good message. On Monday morning, we're in here in chapel, as we always are, mid-morning, and we're in a phase in the year where our sixth formers are speaking about experiences, their lives here, reflectively, maybe for the first point in their lives. I shared earlier today, I hope they reflect about this time for the rest of their lives. But this young man talking about his experience, I think in ways that were hopeful and in ways that were underlining good food for thought for us, how we might be better. Sometimes those talks challenge us to think about our practice and how we've done and how we might improve, and that was a good moment. On Monday night, I was in a faculty meeting with colleagues talking about prizes and lawn ceremony and prize day. In just a couple of weeks, we bestow a lot of honors to sixth formers and some underclassmen. And I've been in those meetings for many years, and the thing I enjoy most about them is hearing colleagues, just being sort of a fly on the wall and listening to colleagues talk about great experiences with kids. You know, how impressed they've been with kids in classrooms, on teams, in dorms, as advisees, as citizens and leaders on this campus. And that is affirming work. You know, so when you're in the spring and racing, and you're sort of looking for sort of what is it's going well, that was a great moment this Monday night. Tuesday night, at the sixth form, Kim and I have the sixth form over to dinner at this time of year in 4 groups. We can't fit them all at once. And I think they come mostly because we serve Chipotle. Not for the company, but they do come. And then once they're there, it's just fun, I think, to sit with them for a little bit, have some catered food that they enjoy, and just think about the school, and I think mostly thank them, I think, for the work they've done, how they've extended themselves and taken risks and pushed and challenged and experienced discomfort and learned through it. And a lot of what makes the school work well is the fact that our kids do that and that they're encouraged to do that here. So that was fun. A little later that night, we had fifth formers over. And I'm at a point in the year where I'm thinking about next year's school prefects and trying to make what are always very difficult decisions about who I'm going to ask to serve in that role and to think with me about the school over the course of the year. And there are about 50 fifth formers who turned up at our house interested in that role, talking to the current school prefects about the work and what's gone well and what hasn't gone as well and all of that. So it's exciting, I think, to be in the midst of kids who are so interested in impacting their school and leading us to a great year. It's inspiring. Also on Wednesday, an email turned up in my inbox from Mary Jo Karabatsis, who's our Dean of Teaching and Learning and sort of works with us, with our faculty on working with different learning styles in our classroom and thinking about being a more collaborative faculty, trying to continue to find our way in that direction, inch by inch. And the Open Door Brooks email that she sent out on Wednesday is sort of an encouragement with incentive, gift cards to teachers for visiting classes for 5 or 10 minutes over the course of the day, just to sort of see what's happening and to learn from colleagues and to experience it. And that spirit, I think, is something we're making headway with, learning from one another. They're incredible teachers here. You'll hear from 2 of them this morning, and I think the work they do, the more we share it and see it and experience it, the more we learn how to hone our own craft. And so that was fun to see. Thursday morning in chapel, we had the English department's version of lessons and carols, which in the English department means there are sort of hymns. There's kids who are singing, playing instruments and singing, and then they were sharing poems in between, their favorite poems and a little bit about why. So just good stuff. And then Thursday night, I was in here for our oratory class, public speaking course, where we have our kids talk, and 4 sixth formers speaking in their oratory talk about, I think, really deeply personal and meaningful stuff for them. And I'm amazed always at the confidence that our kids have in this space and in this community amongst peers and teachers to put a lot on the line. So I share all of that with you, I think, to try to give you a feeling in the moment of sort of my pride, I think our pride in the work we're doing. We feel good about it. We have a lot still to do, but you're sort of descending, parachuting into a thriving school. I think there's no 2 ways about that, and that feels really good. The last thing I'd say just about our kids and the moment, I got earlier this year, a 5th form boy approached me, and he said to me, "Mr. Packard, we really should send an email to every student in the school on his or her birthday, wishing him or her a happy birthday. We should do that." And I said, that's a great idea. And he said, it should come from you. um, and so I said, you're right, it should. And so the wizards of technology, Ryan Dobbins among them, sort of figured out how to manufacture an email that every student at Brooks gets an email on his or her birthday. And I was thinking, yeah, big deal, an email from Mr. Packard, that's not going to be all that. And it's amazing to me how many kids write back to me, thanks to this student who prodded me into doing it, saying thanks. And one of them I want to share with you because it was just really neat. So this young man who's a fifth former had turned 18, and he happened to be in Hungary on exchange when our birthday email made its way to him. And so not only did he send me back sort of a thank you, which I'll share with you, but he sent pictures of celebrating his birthday with his host family in Hungary and just having the time of his life. And he wrote, I have to say on this special day that I appreciate Brooks School so much that no words can describe. I deeply believe that I've made the right decision to come to Brooks. The students and faculty members are amazing, the campus is gorgeous, and the opportunities one can find here are exceptional, especially the exchange program. It not only broadens my view, but also teaches me that all people around the world are together as one, as if they belong to the same family. After thanking me, he then said, indeed, as Brooks's motto, he meant mission, says, I've received the most meaningful educational I will ever have in my life. So those are good moments, and those emails come back, and it's all thanks to this fifth former making me send birthday emails to everybody, which is great. So in sum, our students pull for each other, they push each other, they collaborate, they celebrate, and I said recently at an admission reception, our kids compete, but not really in ways that are in direct competition with one another. It's a much more collaborative culture here than that, and that feels good and right for our school. So the other things just about the moment, I do want to talk a little bit about our faculty. I'm occasionally asked by alums who are back and recall faculty members who impacted them in ways. And the question I typically get is, how are we doing as a school at attracting and retaining and holding people for whom Brooks School becomes a significant chunk of their life? And I think it's rooted in a notion that that institutional memory is important. And it's sort of a feeling I agree with. And I guess I would want you to know that among the things that feel great to me now, one is that I feel and think and see more colleagues of mine sinking sort of their professional aspiration, ambition into this place, finding more to do here as opposed to seeking opportunities to do it elsewhere. And that's important. And at the same time, I would emphasize that this is a dynamic group. I mean, it's a group of teachers, our faculty, I think, and administration, I think people who are leading in new ways, who are not static, who are not sort of rolling the ball out every year and doing the same thing. It's very dynamic and challenging. And I'm always sort of working with colleagues who are looking for more, more support, more funding, more ability to do better work. And that's the sort of situation that we should be in. It's an aspirational group trying to find ways to reach kids more effectively. So that you should know. And then the other piece I would just emphasize is our board. I now in my 10th year as head, and in that period of time, really in the last 5 or so, there's been an important sort of transition with our board. We for many years were led by graduates from the mid-1960s, really for more than 30 years, going back to the early 1980s. And Nick Booth's transition to Steve Gorham, who was in the class of 1985 2 years ago. Steve's now in his second year as president of the board. Was important. The school will need to do more of that work and find ways to add, I think, engagement and energy and interest and wisdom and perspective from our 80s and even our 90s graduates more and more as we go. Our board is challenging in good ways. They have high expectations, a desire for excellence, and that is the right kind of board to be working with. So when I'm talking with colleagues who are leading other schools and hearing about their challenges with their board members, I don't have that. So it's important, I think, for all of you to know that our alums to know, our parents to know, our community to know that we have a great board, I think, a great group of people who are doing a ton of work to make the school go forward. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. Summary point, I guess, is a lot of wind at our back. I'll talk about headwinds in a minute, but there's a lot of wind at our back, and it's primarily people that make it work. I want to say a little bit about our campaign, the one that's finishing, not the centennial that's coming. And the campaign for Brooks, we're in our 5th year of that effort. It was a $60 million goal, and we had a lot of hopes at the beginning of it, at outset. And candidly, I wasn't sure at the beginning how it would all come together. Would we be able to realize the aspirations that we had? And when we started that work, we did so, I think, thinking first about mission. What can we do as a school that will lead to more meaningful experience for our kids more often? What steps can we take? And so a lot of the emphasis on it was around community. And the first things we did in that campaign was this building and a field, an athletic field with lights and really a venue, I would call it. And it was really aimed at trying to gain momentum and build in experiences that we can have together more effectively. This space was too small. It was literally falling apart. Many of you know it was built in 1930. It was intended to be temporary. Thank goodness it remained permanent. It is, in my view, sort of the iconic Brooks School space. We come here to do things together that we couldn't do anywhere else on campus. And so making certain that the Ashburn Chapel was built to last for a long time and serve the community in ways that it is, in space that we can fit in. We all fit in here, if you can believe it, intimately, snugly, but we do. And that, I think, was important, a whole lower level, if you had a chance to explore the building, a lot that we can do down there before it was just a disaster down below. So when they started working on the building, we realized that it was literally almost falling apart. There were a couple of foundational things where it was days from collapsing. So to have achieved that early on and be in our 4th year in this space was huge. The field, aside from what it does in the spring when it's raining nonstop and giving our teams chances to practice on dry land, it's really about bringing parents and faculty members and kids together for night games and community experiences, the likes of which we could not do before. And so that's been fun. The two bigger pieces of this campaign, however, one's financial aid. And at the outset of this, I was talking with our CFO yesterday. In my first year as head, which was fiscal year 2009, our financial aid budget was a little over $2.2 million in that year. In fiscal year 19, next year, we've set a budget that will have it at $4.5 million. Okay, and while that, as I said to the alumni board yesterday, might sound a little better than it actually is, because unfortunately, tuition rates have gone up too, so the cost of financial aid has grown. But we have about 30 more students, nearly 10% of our student body here on need-based financial aid now. More students this year than we've ever had before. And we've done that through great giving and through prioritizing and through a belief that making certain that difference, broadly defined, can be in our school makes us a better school. And we're experiencing that in great ways. So to be at 31, 32% as opposed to 19% of our students here on need-based aid has made us a better school, in my view. And that's due to incredible support that we've received. The centerpiece of this campaign, and I'll take you on a little video later, last year at this time there was nothing, there was not that building there. Now it's there, you can't miss it. And that project is more than half of the capital expenditure of this campaign, about a $28 million effort. And it was the piece of the campaign that I had said at the beginning, how on earth are we going to raise the money to do this? And then someone made a $7 million gift, and a $5 million gift, and another $5 million gift, and a $3 million gift, and it was inspiring to see that, and to see that happening. I took my tour through there for the first time in 3 months, and it's just an amazing facility that once we're in, we'll sort of stretch our wings and do more, and I couldn't be more excited about it. So we'll give you a little video of it later, a fly-through, very fancy. I did it last year at this. The kids ooh and ah when we do that, so oohs and ahs would be great. And then the last thing I would just say is a lot of master plan work. If you're seeing some gates around and some new roads, we really have been thinking a lot within this campaign about the core of the campus, sort of the main spine from the academic building to the dining hall. And how can we continue to get cars away from this part of the school and make it more pedestrian, more sort of human, more communal? And this building is a huge part of that. I mean, when it's done, there'll be a huge quad, which is now just a dirt pile between the dining hall and that building, outdoor space to be together. The road will become narrower, it will look more like a path that cars are driving on as opposed to a road that people walk on. And I think that will enhance more grass, less blacktop. And so that part feels good too. We keep moving that piece forward. So a lot of progress of that sort. Programmatically, I would say a couple things. We are thinking more by virtue of learning from things that we're doing. So winter term in January, if you're familiar with that, this is our 7th year where we take 3 weeks in January and all of our students take one class. It's team taught. When we hatched the idea, it was really to put teachers in position to teach an area that they could dive into and be immersed in and focused on, that maybe in their, either it's an interest of theirs or within what they're teaching that they couldn't get at in a way that satisfied them by virtue of feeling a need to race through content. And that's been interesting to us in terms of deep experience and what deep experience lends itself to. Meaning, we think, really being more mission-driven. You add internship opportunities that our kids are engaging in more and more in the summer through programs that we're partnering with. We have 4 students who go to Apple Computer in Cupertino every summer and work on top secret Apple things that they have to sign disclosures about not telling anyone what they're doing. And those kinds of opportunities are more in number. My own daughter, who's a 6th former, spent yesterday at Massachusetts General Hospital watching surgeries, courtesy of Peter Dunn, class of 1982. And, I think that as we think about deep experience, immersive experience, exchanges, internships, winter term, and then how can we do more of that within our own program, our core program, the notion is trying to get kids on their feet and out of chairs. How can we do more and more of that over time? How do we confront sort of content versus skills kinds of conversations? What do we spend our time on? So I wouldn't suggest to you today that we've answered those questions. I suspect we may never, and nor do I suggest that there aren't questions that we've been thinking about for 90 years in different ways. But the piece that feels good to me programmatically is we're thinking a lot about value. We're driven by mission. We're seeking deep experience, more depth, and ultimately, what can we equip our kids with more effectively that will allow them to do well as undergraduates and as graduate students and in chosen walks of life that they pursue? What are those skills that we can hone a little more effectively? And a few of you are here are former Brooks faculty members, and you and others will know well that sort of moving sort of an independent school faculty in unison in a particular direction about what we're teaching and how we teach it is not a snap. So we're in that work, and it's a good conversation for us to be in. So I would say programmatically, campaign progress, a lot has happened, a lot will happen. We'll be in that building in the fall. I think we'll be in it aspirationally. We will learn about things that we can do beyond visual art and music and theater on behalf of community that will facilitate. So it feels exciting to be poised to take a step with so much possibility in front of us. In terms of challenges, what kinds of things do we think a lot about? What kinds of things at a board level are we wrestling with and looking ahead? And I guess I'd say, a lot of it is around the nature and desirability of boarding school education in the United States. If I were to summarize it, it's not, as I said to the alumni board yesterday, boarding school is not a growth industry in 2018. Okay, and it's true. More and more families want their children to go to school closer to home or to live at home, and it's also accurate to say boarding school's never been mainstream. Okay, lots of people just say, don't you go to boarding school if you did something wrong, or you're being punished and sent away, and so there is that's been out there, and As we think about that, particularly with tuition levels and costs of running the school that make access to a Brooks School education harder and harder for people, how can we continue to be appealing to full or nearly full pay families in the United States who are thinking and wanting a boarding school education? How can we demonstrate value and get them to come to campus and to entertain a notion that maybe they wouldn't even dream of doing? How do we get to them? So that full pay domestic boarding student at a tuition level that next year will be a little north of $61,000 is challenging. That's a challenging thing, and the hard part of that is that we need that. About 70% of what runs the school is tuition, and so that's a challenge. It's a dilemma maybe more than a problem, and it's one that requires management and work on our end on the cost side, and work externally on how we're sharing who we are and how we reach people. And so we're very much engaged in that. It also has us thinking a little bit about size and model. We opened the year with 378 students, which is about as big as we've ever been. And we have thought that might a different size be something we should think about. So, a lot of things in the air as we think about that particular challenge. The financial model of a 270-acre boarding school on a beautiful lake inside 495 north of Boston. I've said this a lot this year. You went to sort of investors and you said, "Hey, I'd like to buy 270 acres inside of 495 on a beautiful, spectacular lake, and put up some new buildings and have a lot of old buildings that are falling apart and need a lot of attention and care. And I think it's probably about right to have a teacher for every 5 students. That would be the ratio. And we want to pay them well and compensate and house them and feed them and educate their kids. And we want to do these things. What do you think? You want to invest in that? And so that reality is there. And so I think what we know, what I feel, and I think all of us who've experienced the school, who work at it, who attend it, that there's something important here, something vital, something impactful, something that holds over time that's not ordinary. It's extraordinary. And but it requires work. And I think confronting the fact that we don't exist by divine right, we exist by virtue of delivering great experiences to kids. And so we have to be on our toes, and we have to be working in ways that test that model and push at it, and we're doing a lot of that. I would add a challenge. A few weeks ago, I was at Choate Rosemary Hall. I was chairing their reaccreditation. Every 10 years, we're reaccredited, and I've done this 4 times. And of the professional development work that I do, there's nothing more valuable than going and just jumping into another school, reading about their challenges, talking with them extensively, and then trying to figure out how to help them solve their problems. And the reason it's great is because it's 2 things. One is you come to realize that all of us in relative terms are facing very similar issues. And so there's some comfort in that. And then there's also, at least for me, every time I've done it, I'm really thrilled to come back to my own school. There's some problems there. I'm like, thank God I don't have to deal with that. And so Choate is a fantastic place and a different kind of school, 2.5 times our size. But what comes up for them and for us, time. All the time we're talking about time. Again, not new for boarding school faculty members, but thinking a lot about the triple threat. When I started working at Brooks in 1990, I was an intern and have the slightest idea what I was doing. And so I remember I coached soccer in the fall. I was the boys' JV ice hockey coach, and that was sort of like taking over a slapshot team, if you've seen that film. And then the spring rolls around, and Dan Rourke, who's the athletic director, says to me, "You're going to coach JV boys lacrosse this spring." And I said, "Okay." And I'd never played lacrosse before, ever in my life. Threw me a stick and a ball, and off you go. Like, good luck, okay? And so, I raised that because at the time, and to a degree still, um, we believe that value is conferred a lot by virtue of what I'd call sort of multi-contact relationships. Brooks works well because we live in dorms and we advise and we coach and we teach and we inhabit the campus with kids, and they see us in different ways. And it was easier 25 years ago to be a great generalist than it is in 2018. That's the expectation around expertise. I would not pass as a sufficient JV boys lacrosse coach now. I did then, barely, but I wouldn't now. And I think some of what our faculty experience is that. They're getting texts from students all the time. Emails, parents, the volume of communication. So it puts the burden on the school, as was true at Choate, to think about the model. So on the one hand, you're trying to maintain this multi-contact relationship piece, which is so critical, I think, to good work happening. And then on the other hand, acknowledge that it's not the same as it was, that it is different, that the weight people are carrying and the expectations of them are growing. And so how we sort of make those points meet is something that we're thinking a lot about. And then the last thing I would offer around challenges that I feel a lot, and I think colleagues do too, is, when we're talking about prizes, or we're celebrating kids at Prize Day, or even thinking about Memorial Chapel this morning, or why people come to reunions. I don't think people come because of the science building, and they won't come because of that building. I think people come because of relationships, because of experiences had here that matter to them and continue to matter to them. And and it's very hard to measure that, and so we live on the one hand in an environment in education where there's more pressure put on the school to sort of capture what it is that a Brooks School education delivers, to sort of share it with people in a way that a soundbite can cover, or you can put on an email, or just encapsulate it, measure it. And it's hard to, and so we can't, what I think is true here is that the gray matter of this experience is what you bump into sort of accidentally in large measure is what makes it so rich and full. And so we're struggling a little bit with how do we, in that outreach work we're trying to do with prospective families, share what we are and what you will experience if you choose to come here in a way that is measurable, quantifiable, is sort of tangible, but doesn't lose sight of this piece that's so organic and important and lasting for people. So that's a big one too. If you have a solution to that, let me know later. So what's next? What are the things that we're thinking about in that centennial campaign that I mentioned and will probably continue to mention going forward? As we come out of this campaign this spring, and there's still opportunity to contribute to that campaign, I would just name that for everyone. You can have your own seat in the theater over there for a low, low price. But the next few years, I think stepping back a little bit and having achieved a lot, focusing a lot on our annual giving effort. In certain respects, in the last couple of years, by virtue of being broad in the work we're doing, it's been hard to try to generate on an annual basis income that we need to operate the school in ways that we want to. I think sort of redoubling our effort in that way will be part of it. I referenced my visit to Choate. In a couple of years, we will be going through our own reaccreditation again. We did in my third year as head. We'll be doing it again in 3 years, but working on that process in 2 years. And there's great opportunity for us in that. So ahead of naming anything that will be part of a centennial campaign, I think that introspective work, kicking our own tires, thinking about what we aren't happy with and what do we feel like is going well, will yield some interesting next steps. So really, I think I would say in the next 3 years, what you'll be hearing from us is a pitch and a plea to support us on an annual basis at the highest level you can. And you'll also be hearing from us trying to tend to residential facilities. We do not have sort of faculty housing or dormitory housing that's at a standard across the board or at a volume level that we want and need. And so I think in an interim way, we're going to work hard to try to address that in the next 3 years. And we'll see how that goes. I think after that, with the NEASC visit and our accreditation feedback in hand, we'll be defining, I think, what the Centennial campaign will be. That will be a big endowment piece. You know, we've had some success with endowment, but our endowment is not where we'd like it to be. You know, it'd be great. It's about 80 million right now. For it to be 150 would be just terrific. And so I think how do we find ways to earn endowment support will be part of it. But in particular, I would point to residential spaces, you know, needing to house faculty here and housing that works for them, for their families as they evolve, in ways that put them in position to impact kids, importantly, some in the dorms, some not. Academic space will be a big part of this campaign, I think, the nature of it. We've already done some imagining of what classrooms should look like as we evolve how we're teaching and what we're teaching. We don't have at Brooks a square footage problem. You know, we don't need more space, but we need different space. And some refitting of that will be a part of this campaign, I think, for sure, when we get to that. And then taking care of faculty and employees. And that's not just about faculty salaries, but it's really, I think, it's about making profoundly fulfilling work accessible to teachers. You know, and our faculty have lots of choices about where they might teach, you know, where they could be a history teacher or science teacher or a coach. And they choose to do it here, I think, by virtue of the fact that our classes are small. They can know their kids well, and there's some ability to do things that they might not have been able to do somewhere else. And so as much as compensating faculty, broadly defined, is critical and making progress there will be important, a lot of it is about providing time and rejuvenation and professional development and in ways that will allow us to retain great people, you know. And so there's work to do on that. There'll be a big faculty endowment pitch in that campaign for sure. And then the last piece is the financial aid one. You know, we're going to continue to need to work at that. You know, Brooks School education, we can do some things on cost. You know, we've been raising tuition at sort of a 3% level, which is much lower than was the case, but as you know, it compounds. And so those numbers, you sort of race through. We went from 50 to 60 in like a blink. And it's a challenge, you know, so we can confront some of that by making sure that financially families who can't pay that tuition can still access the school. And so we're proud of the progress we've made there. There's more to do. But that will be some element of that campaign. To close, and before putting our Art Center tour on the screen, you know, I would just say this. And you'll hear this from me in different ways frequently going forward. We need engagement. You know, when we started the campaign for Brooks 5 years ago, we really talked a lot about it initially as being an engagement campaign as much as anything. And we need feedback, and we need to know what we're doing well with our outreach and what we're not doing as well with our outreach. We need help, you know, finding students who will entertain the notion of coming, get them on campus. And we need that kind of engagement, that involvement. And so we're going to ask a lot. We're going to ask for time. We're going to ask for care. We're going to ask for people to keep Brooks School in the front of your mind. And the more we do that, the more successful we are at earning that level of attention. You know, it's our view that that will position the school to continue to make great strides and great progress going forward. I'm very bullish. You know, I couldn't do the job if I wasn't, but I'm very bullish about where we are and about the prospects ahead despite challenges that exist. And I'm bullish really at the end of the day because of people I work with and people who pull for the school and care for it. And I have felt incredible wind at my back in the 10 years that I've been in the role. And so I would want you to know that, you know, that we have challenges, but we have a lot of belief in ourselves. And the experience our kids have, I think you'll hear that today, is pretty neat. There's a lot of good stuff happening. And then the last point I would just say, and then we can cue the video, is, we're not seeking to be anybody else. I said to the alumni board yesterday, I've said this a couple times this year, I'll meet at different points through the year with consultants and who are working with families thinking about schools, and usually a consultant will ask, one did this year, who are you trying to be more like? And it's sort of a question that I hate, truthfully, because it's not what we're after. Okay, we learn enormously from our peers, and there are so many terrific schools in our neighborhood, but we want to be a better Brooks school. And that's sort of really good about our DNA and who we are, who we've been, and who we might still be. And so learning from others, pulling that into what we're doing is critical. But I answered the consultant, I just said, we're aimed at being a better and better and better version of this place that we're proud of and believe in, and in all due haste, we'll be moving in that direction. So now we have a video, or I don't actually know what the actual clinical term is for it, but this is the Arts Center. So if you've been out and walked around and seen it, this would be sort of looking at it from an evolved Main Street. So when I was talking about the change in the width of the road and the spine of right out here, it'll look something like that. And you're standing now sort of in front of Thornhouse. So if you were in front of Thornhouse looking at it, diagonally it looked like that. And then we start moving, and I'll just have Ryan stop every once in a while. So you walk into the building this way. This is the second level. It's a 2-story facility. And you come in, and you turn to your right. I did this at Grandparents' Day, and there were 12 people here. 3 of them were my family members. So this in the front, you can stop there, maybe, Ryan. This is sort of, as you're looking at it from the road beyond your right, and this is sort of the music building component of the facility. And it's an ensemble room, as you can see, with great windows. It's got great, great light. You can move on. So you'll see kids rehearsing as you walk by. And back into the hallway, which is really a street, and I'll say a bit about that in a minute. And then on the other side of that end of the building is visual art space. So these will be studios with sort of floor-to-ceiling windows, so looking out at what will be a quad with a beautiful hill that you can see there. So a great outdoor space that's being generated by this work. So you get a little feel for the view. Squash Center in the back. Now the street concept, the architects who designed the building, we liked a lot through this notion of the street. So maybe we can sort of hold there. And so on this second floor, you can sort of see the back end of the building comes out down here on this road. And the thought was in creating a facility that would sort of bridge the 2 roads, the pedestrian road and this road. And so we talk about it as an arts street, really. Continue. So maybe right here you could hold. So you'll see here, this is the cross, so right out here, the building goes, there's a doorway where you can walk through it, basically, from this side of it to the other side of it, below this level. So a lot of sitting area. You'll see, those who remember the Danforth room, that plaque there is the Stephen Metcalf Danforth plaque. That's where that building was, and that's where that plaque will be there, restored in there with a picture of him. Continue. So there you get a look heading out of the building if you're on the lower level. Now coming up on the right is the theater, which I will be claiming is the finest theater of its kind anywhere in New England. But it's a magnificent facility. It's just incredible that we're going to have this space. A balcony level, lower level a lot of flexible space. So with some freestanding chairs, it'll normally be 331, but it can expand to over 400. We have extra seats. The stage itself has a full fly area behind it, and it's incredible. And green seats, just to be sure. At one point, they suggested red seats, and I just like, what? So green seats. Continuing down the street to sort of the back end of the building, sort of behind the theater. And there'll be two spaces on your left. The first room on your left is actually, at this point it was something else, but it'll be a photography studio in there, and then this back corner room is a great room. And so that, you can see we kept that beautiful view. It's the tennis court luxury box, actually. You can stand there and see, looking out this way. Hold it there, Ryan. And so it takes you through the floor into the black box theater, which is behind sort of the scene shop and sort of where all the tech work will be done, which we'll be running by in a moment. Continue. It's a much bigger black box than the one that we had. Very versatile. And back into the street. Different staircases taking you up, and now moving back towards Main Street. So on the left, intentionally sort of a glass wall there so you can see all the work being done. That's where it's all going to be happening, in that space and in other spaces back in there. And I didn't mention at the higher level, one of the nice things about the theater is it has these big barn doors that slide. And so for overflow crowds, people can sort of stand in the street and still see what's going on in the theater. That will be true on the second floor too. So it's got a real range of, you want to make it smaller, you can. You want to make it bigger, you can. Steps up, and now heading into the visual art and music end of the hallway. That door would take you toward the chapel on the left, and on the right would take you towards the dining hall and squash center. So on the left here are music practice rooms, a digital media lab at the end, and then on the right, more art studio work, ceramic space with doors that open onto the quad. So you can go out onto a terrace and do work. Again, floor-to-ceiling windows. Just great, great light in the space. And you get a little feel for the quad, the stairs up to Main Street, and big, big rooms. And I was saying the alumni board yesterday when I was talking with them, that Brooks, other than the Lehman Arts Center, the school's never really built, the barn was not built to be an arts building, if you didn't know. It was built for animals. And so the music practice rooms, which were made were once for animals. So it's nice to be building an art building for the arts, actually. So now I think pretty shortly we'll sort of fly up above it, and you get a look at the overview and coming out here. So this will take you out into what will be that quad. Just a great outdoor space. And then we go up, up, and away. So pretty cool. It's on schedule, so we'll be in there, I think, sometime in October is the plan. It's on budget. That part's good too. And really helping us transform sort of the core of the campus in a way. It's a huge step in that direction. So thank you. And I am now going to turn this over to my colleagues, Dave Price and Justine Rooney, and students, Kate Wilson and Andrew Stevens, who will talk about some of the good work that they're doing. Thanks a lot.
All right, well, welcome back. My name is Dave Price. I'm a math teacher at Brooks. I've been asked to talk about technology. I'd like to mention a couple things that John brought up that kind of came to mind. First of all, his thing about the birthdays. My wife and I had a similar conversation as he did with that fifth former. She said, well, first of all, I should tell you that I live over in Thornhouse. So I've had a nice view of the construction of this new building that we've been watching. I've been listening to the beeping. In particular, I hate when the tractors go backwards because they beep beep. Every morning about 6:30 in the morning, we get that on Saturday all summer long last summer. So it was great. But anyhow, my wife said, these kids in the dorm have birthdays, and we should make them cupcakes or some sort of dessert. And it should come from you. So it's a very, very similar discussion that we had in my house. So we make cupcakes and various, birthday cakes for kids and their birthdays. We have 38 boys to deal with, and it's about a week, pretty much a weekly event in Thornhouse to have a birthday thing at a 10 o'clock check-in. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and get this queued up. And I'd like to share with you some fun math stuff today. Let's see. Am I on? Okay. Okay, so first thing I want you to notice is a little different thing now. I've been at Brooks for 4 years. I came from Colorado and California before. I've taught 25 years in public school, mostly with classrooms in rows with 30 to 35 students in them. And now this is what my classroom looks like now. You notice there's a couple things different about it. First of all, you don't see any rows. You see a lot less students. And you see me in the middle of the classroom versus me being, in the front of the classroom, and kids interactively working with technology. So I'd like to share with you some of the things that we do in the classroom. Okay, so let me get back to my script. Thanks for giving me time to share some of the exciting new ways that we're using technology to help kids learn mathematics at Brooks. In a moment, I will demonstrate emerging technology that helps students in new ways to play, explore, ask questions, build intuition. Let me get back to the screen. Build intuition, make conjectures, visualize, discover, and then reflect on their learning. In short, technology is being utilized at Brooks School to make learning mathematics a student-centered, active experience. Now, what you see here, does anybody remember this? Well, by the way, I brought a visual aid, but I realized the demographics, I brought the wrong thing. Anybody know what this is? It's a graphing calculator. These were invented about the 90s. I'm not sure that any of you were using these in high school. I should have brought a log table book, the CRC book. Remember those? Anybody remember those? Abscissa and mantissa, have you guys heard those words? Anybody remember those words? I think kids today would think those are a restaurant or some sort of app, but nevertheless, those are other things. This is a linear programming problem done with Desmos. I'm not sure why I'm clicking off here. This is a linear programming problem where we graph some constraints on a computer. We don't have to solve for y. We can list them any way we want. We can find intersection points by simply clicking on the point and see if I can get one to stay. Just simply clicking on it. When I was young, I used to have to solve the system and do all the algebra by hand. But nowadays, we can spend a little more time talking about the problem solving going on with that. Okay, next one I want to share with you is something called Desmos activities. Desmos activities create fun ways to explore mathematical concepts and learn mathematics in a collaborative and active environment. Desmos provides an opportunity for the teacher to create interactive ways to give a check for understanding or enhance conceptual understanding of key concepts. Let me just tell you the gist of this game. Basically, you see that there's those stars. Ryan, why is that flickering? Am I doing something wrong? What's that? So you can see those stars down there. The goal is for that purple dot to hit that line and hit those stars. Clearly right now it's not working because if I was to hit that, I wouldn't hit any stars. So I would have to lower, or the student I should say, and again they're sitting in the classroom, they're all working on these independently, have to change their y-intercept. Oh, I don't know, let's guess
change, pardon me,
technical difficulties.
change the cable and see what happens here, but sorry.
Oh no, I lost my whole thing.
Sorry. Ignore or reopen. 2 seconds.
Let's see if we, this is the problem with technology sometimes, right? I lost everything.
This cable's bumping.
Uh-oh. Probably should have just left it flickering. Now I lost everything. Is it on? Well. You're back. Success. All right. All right. So basically, kids are put in problem-solving situations. Uh-oh.
You keep talking.
All righty then. So I've lost my my thing. Of course, it's my fault. All right. Anyway, I'll try to wing it here. Basically, by using these kinds of activities, kids are interacting with mathematics instead of listening to me kind of tell them, and they're kind of solving their own problems to learn the things we're trying to teach them. All right. Am I on? Is this on? Is this on? So on this marble slides activity, we can do this with several kinds of things. So in the beginning of my Algebra 2 class, which I brought a student with me today, we start with lines. We can do it with exponentials, with parabolas, and then eventually with rational functions, as we just did. It continues to increase in difficulty. And I was going to demonstrate this for you.
Why don't I take your laptop? I'll do it on back. I'll do it from mine, and you just tell me what to show. Is that cool? I'll show this.
Sure. Although I need it because I've lost all my tabs. Yeah, I know. I'll just.
There we go. 2 6. You made it saying it's got signal. All right.
Okay, this looks beautiful. Okay, so here's another one. Again, in this case, again, I'm going to go through this quickly. We need to change the slope. So a kid would play with this. I call this, again, just to demonstrate, a successful run. So kids, after they've kind of fixed the equation to make it work, they have some sort of reward for that, and then they get things like this. Some other solving problems here where it's like you hit the first couple, but it missed, so they need to lengthen things out. So again, I call this Goldilocks guessing. This one's too small, this one's too big, this one's just right. Obviously, the one you just saw was too small. I'm going to make it too big and see what happens. Now we missed it, so the kid goes, oh, maybe if I make it a little shorter, that'll work. Oops, maybe a little shorter still. And then as kids are going through this, they're learning things that I just can't tell them. And again, they just kind of discover and explore on their own and find through these things. And I'll just kind of slide through an example of kind of like as they go through it and they learn through it, they go through several slides of this, they get to challenges. How are you going to get all 4 of those stars, right? That's going to require about 4 equations to do that. And again, students learn how to get through that. So the next one I want to show you is the same thing with rationals. So let me see how quickly I can get this. Let's go. Let's see. Oh, that's the lines. Okay, so here we have the same thing with rational functions. And in this case, we would hit it. We'd see, clearly, again, we're not getting them, so the graph needs to be moved in what direction? Anybody? Up, you got it. So let's go +3, see what happens. And again, they kind of work their way through this. And again, using now instead of lines, doing the same thing as rational functions, we can do this with exponential functions, do this with parabolas, with any kind of function there is. So there's all kinds of those kinds of things. Polygraph, let me show you what polygraph looks like. See if I still got that. There it is. Polygraph looks like this. Polygraph is an interactive game in which students ask questions that utilize mathematical vocabulary and deduction to narrow a group of graphs down to one. So basically what you'll get, you'll have about 20 graphs there, and the kids will be paired up electronically. So you have a classroom of 14, 15 kids, and then they're paired up. They don't know which kid they're paired up with, and they're asking it's kind of like a 20 questions game where you ask yes or no questions using math vocabulary, trying to figure out which equation that a student has chosen. So basically on the left are the graphs, on the right-hand side are the questions. Obviously, it's not a great slide, so you can't totally see it. But again, I want to also show you what the classroom looks like. Again, you see the kids are all sitting in such a way that their computer screens are facing the middle. This is so that, if the kids are all facing like they normally might, I would see the back of their computer screens. They might be on Facebook, online shopping, Instagram, whatever it is they do on whatever the app of the day is, watching videos on YouTube. This way I could see from anywhere in the room what every kid is working on, and hopefully staying on task and interacting. But they're working in pairs, they're working together, and they're learning mathematics in new ways. This is actually an AP Calc class. You can kind of see in front, that's my computer. My computer is actually projected onto the screen, and it's tracking where each kid is during the lesson. So I could tell who's behind, so to speak, because it's kind of individualized. People are going at their own pace. So I could see who's behind, and then I'll spend my time with the student who's kind of lagging behind for one reason or another. They're stuck on a slide or something like that. So it enables me to kind of track who needs help. And the kids kind of look at that in a competitive way. Some of the more competitive kids, they want to win the race, even though I always tell them it's not a race. Okay. So the last thing I want to show you, and then I'll give up the stage. Okay. I lost all my tabs, so I was prepared. I got to spell. So this is an activity that I did where you're going to see kind of the teacher page. You can kind of see the dot means a kid has actually taken that slide. This is Kate's class. And I could pick on any slide. And then there's also opportunities for kids to reflect on their learning. So I could see, later, like after class, I'll look at this and see what all the kids were saying. And so I can kind of follow up and kind of look at, the different commentary that they had, expressions they're learning. I could also see what each kid did on every single problem. So I can kind of see that, and see, you can see Elizabeth may perhaps didn't get to that slide, but the other ones in red are all complete. And then there's some sliders that they're playing with, and then of course my other thing I want to show you. show you what they looked like, what they looked at. What they looked at is they had these ellipses and circles and hyperbolas written in a kind of a dotted form. So they had to type the equation so that it matched up. So let me see if I can do this like a student. I'm going to make a mistake on purpose. Okay, so again, this is that Goldilocks thinking. Obviously, the radius is too small, so they try it again. Now it's too big, so they try it again. Now it's just right. And that's basically what they're going through as they're learning to write the equations of conics, circles, ellipses, parabolas, hyperbolas, and I want to go to one of my favorite slides. Then they get to see if they can do this one. Does that look familiar to anybody? Further, Desmos activities give students opportunities to reflect on their learning in a manner that is personal and empowering. It makes learning mathematics a conversation teacher features will allow for me to follow up later on. In the end, I'm just trying to create an interactive experience with a subject that I'm passionate about, and I want kids to really enjoy it and you know, while they're learning it. Different than when I was young. I mean, I certainly was good at it and enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it for my own purposes. It was taught in a way that was not very accessible to all students, and this is a way that brings all kids in to their learning. So I'll go ahead and stop there, and I apologize for the technical difficulties we had there. I'll just leave this up here.
See if the millennial can have any more success. All right. So John spoke to our challenges in space and coming together as a community. One of the challenges when I arrived at Brooks 5 years ago is that we didn't have a platform for us to come as a community online. So we needed a space to take attendance, to post our homework, and have students have access to communicating with us and communicating with the material or using the material that we have in class. So this is what my typical day looks like when I log on to our platform. So every student has an access to this, parents, faculty, and here I would take attendance and then start with my day. There's tabs to look at each one of my classes. They have their own individual tab. We have resources to communicate as a community, and additionally, we can use things like our grade book, and this is where I post my dress code violations. So I can put them in conduct right there. It's one of my favorite things to do. So with this platform, it allows us to communicate with our students in a different way. We can post their homework assignments, we can grade them within the platform, and we can check in on their progress as they go through. So here you can see the submitted homework for one of my students in my physics class. She's gone through her textbook and answered the assigned questions. She didn't have any trouble with any of these questions, but I can go through before the class starts and look to see, were they not able to answer question 3? Did they have issues with 49? And sometimes they'll write notes to me that they were confused or having trouble with a particular problem. This allows me to tailor my lesson before we even enter class to access what they're confused about and to better teach, honestly. So I can also see with this, if you look on the side, I can see what day they posted it at and what time. I teach introductory level physics, so that is mostly freshmen or new sophomores. With that, we have a lot of time to talk about time management and what time you're accessing your work. So at the start of the year, it's really interesting for me personally to be able to see when are they doing their work. Are they doing it at 8:30 p.m. while they're sitting in study hall? Are they doing it before study hall? Are they doing it at 1 in the morning? Sometimes day students, our internet shuts off at night for our boarders, but so I noticed one day student this fall who multiple times posted his homework at 1 or 2 in the morning. So it allowed us to have a really great conversation about, okay, what does your homework load look like? Are you struggling? Is my homework causing you issues? And it came to be that this student just felt like he had so much work and didn't know how to find all the time to do it and was staying up until 1 in the morning doing his work. With that, we were able to communicate with his advisor and look at some planning techniques for him to make sure that he was getting bed at a reasonable time. I'm a science teacher. I think sleep is super important. We can also do things like quiz them at the start of class. So I do a thing called Problem of the Days. This allows me to post 3 questions for them to answer. This was one during our sound unit, and they were looking at kinetic energy and potential energy. So at the start of class, they go through, click their answer, and it's normally a question from the previous lesson or the last night's homework. And this allows me to get real-time data about what they're confused about. You can see on question number 1, 93% of them got it right. That's great, we can move on. But if we look at question number 3, only 53% of them were able to answer this question correctly. This tells me that we've hit a point of confusion. I would then discuss this further, ask them to take their notes out, and access which one of the 7 kids is feeling better about it after the class. So we can do pre or post lessons, which is great. And this is all still in our learning management system on Brooks that we all have access to. So this has allowed us to communicate in a really clear way. Another thing that we can do on Brooks is we can post all of our materials. I also teach environmental science. The largest thing in our landfills is paper waste, 40%. So I'm constantly trying to reduce how much paper I'm giving out to the kids. This allows me to post the project description, the project rubric, a Google folder for them to all input their material so we all have access to it in class, and I can post any other information that they need to know. Additionally, this gives them access to their work anywhere. They can take their computer and go home. I've had students who have to be gone for an athletic commitment or a family event. They can take their computer with them and have access to everything we're doing in class. This allows them to stay up on their work and not fall behind when they have to miss. We can also post discussion threads. This was a discussion thread we did in Andrew, the student I brought's class, where we were looking at municipal solid waste and what ends up in our landfills. And I asked them to pick an interesting waste story and discuss it with the class. I picked Christmas trees as my example. I was looking at whether artificial Christmas trees or natural Christmas trees are better. In case you guys are wondering, natural Christmas trees are better, less plastic. And Andrew posted about plastic water bottles, and he told us about how many plastic water bottles are being used. He told us how long they take to decompose. He provided some sources and then brought it back to the chapter that we were working on. All of this is interactive. They can see each other's posts. They can comment on each other's posts. Some of my colleagues in the English department use this for their nightly homework, and their students will post back and forth about things that they're reading in their book that they're currently covering. This is a great tool for us to be able to use in class. A few things that I'm using outside of our learning management system. So Quizlet is a vocabulary website, we'll call it, where students create flashcards. You also can create a competitive game. I don't know if you guys have noticed a trend. Our students love to compete with one another. I say this as one of the most competitive people you'll ever meet. But it allows me to see what type of terms they're struggling on, and it allows them to go through in teams and try to compete. So they all have their computers, they'll get assigned a team online, and they rotate with their team. This gets so competitive, I have to shut my door because I'm nervous I'm going to disrupt other classes. The kids are hooting and hollering, racing. You can see in this one, they're all around the same point. If they get a question wrong, it brings them all the way back to 0, and the shame that is placed on the student who got it wrong. But the positive note is there that they help each other. Instead of it being an independent activity where they're focused on their learning, they're trying to bring their other team members up to speed and bring them along with them. And this allows them to all collectively learn much better. Another thing that I'm using in the classroom is something called ED Puzzle. We have a lot of access to videos online that are tremendous. In teaching environmental science, I can use things from National Geographic. Vice has a lot of good material. TED Talks are amazing. but I don't typically want to spend 25 minutes in class showing a TED Talk, although the content is fantastic. So how do I show that outside of class and know that the students are getting something from it and actually watching it? I really do care that they watch that 25-minute video. Well, this program allows me to assign it and ask questions throughout. They hate this because they can't skip through the video and they have to answer the questions. Fantastic for me, horrible for them. So this was a documentary on trash. Okay, they were looking at landfills, so we're still on that unit. And they answer multiple choice questions and short answer questions as they go through. So they'd go through, and the video just talked about how much solid waste ends up in a landfill, and they would know that that's 1.3 million tons. I'm really pushing an issue here, I just figured out. But I can also look and see how they did. Were they able to go through and get the correct answer? Some will be short answer questions. It allows me to feel like I can show videos in class and really make sure the students take something away from it. I can also see individually how they're doing. So this is a graph of their progress throughout. It also, again, it shows what time they turned it in. This is really important for us as teachers at Brooks, is making sure that our kids are accessing this material at appropriate times and they feel like they have help when they need it. 7:53 p.m., great time to be doing your homework right before study hall. This is a student who was going through the same platform, and you can see that they had to watch the same segment twice to be able to get the answer, and they still got the answer wrong. So that allows me to look individually and see, okay, why is this student struggling? But they can go back through. So just as Dave said, more time focusing on each individual student's needs. We have the ability to have smaller class sizes, but 14 kids and their individual needs are still really difficult to manage in a 50-minute block. And making sure that their time outside of class is spent productively is a huge goal of ours. The last thing I'll talk about is something called ZipGrade. Andrew Stevens, my friend over here, loves ZipGrade because I can take my phone, and as soon as he's done filling in his multiple choice from his exam, I can scan it and show him exactly what he got. Great time saver on my end, but they can also tell you that they really appreciate having access to how they did quicker. We know generationally that they are impatient, but it also shows me a graph of how they're doing, and each student can get a printout of their individual performance. So you can see on our water unit, this is in our AP Environmental Science class, the class average was about a 78%. These are questions straight from the AP exam. They're meant to be very tricky. They're 5-part questions. But they can see their individual performance, and they can see which questions they got wrong, and they can see how they did comparatively to their peers. Did they get a question wrong and the percentile was very low? That's a confusion for most of them. Or is it something they're not understanding but the rest of the class is getting? How are they preparing for their assessments? Something that I'm hoping to move forward to next year is more tagging of the questions. So here you can see I've tagged the questions based on the question's difficulty and also looking at what skill we were looking at. For my freshmen in my lower level classes, it's really important to assess, are they struggling with critical thinking? Are they struggling with fact-based questions? What type of question are they having a hard time with? This allows me to look at if we're improving and what scope of subject material they are struggling with. So all of these things are things that I've found at professional development opportunities. ZipGrade is single-handedly the best time saver I've ever experienced, and it is $7. So some of this stuff is now being implemented further across the faculty. I know there's probably about maybe 20 of us who use ZipGrade now, and we can share resources with each other. The history department, they're tagging all of their questions for their AP, and they're tagging which century and which time period they were in. So they focused their review for the AP exam based on what time period they had the most trouble with. This is amazing for us as educators to be able to look in real time how to best teach our students. But yeah, that's all I have. So I think we're going to answer some of your questions now, if you guys have any. Thank you guys.